Barrett Jones, presented by Med Center. Urgent care, family medicine, no appointment necessary. Barrett, welcome back to T-Town, man. I hope you're having an awesome day.
What's up, Ryan? Having a great day. How about you, man?
Very good, man. We're trying to move on. I feel like that we've just kind of been kicked in the stomach a little bit here, like a gut punch here in T-Town, and you almost feel guilty for kind of moving on, but I think that's what we almost have to do.
I agree, man. It was a gut punch, and I feel the same way, and I think just hurting for Tua. I think we can all agree that he was, if not the most fun, one of the most fun players to watch and cover, and in Alabama history, and just a great player. And obviously, it seems like his career is probably over. In Alabama, I don't think his career is over at all. By the way, totally. But he was just a lot of fun to watch, and I hate that it had to end that way. And not to mention, just a great kid too. So I'll root for him the rest of his life, no matter where he is, and I hope it's the best for him. But I agree. I think you were probably the same way. I was just kind of hurting Saturday, and it wasn't even honestly necessarily because Alabama might not make the playoff as much as it was just for Tua and his family, and just I know what he's going through. So it's tough to bear.
Very few times in 13 years of covering Nick Saban have I ever watched him show his true emotions. I walked in Monday inside that building. I didn't even have to guess. He said it. He said, this entire building is hurting. And he goes, I'm hurting. And you could see it. You could read the nonverbals with Nick Saban, even though he expressed it verbally. You could see it on his face. He's obviously hurting, but this team's going to have to find a way to build leaderships in a really, really quick way.
Well, yes, they are. There's no doubt. And at this point, it seems like it's got to be Mac's team for the next few weeks, and we're going to find out what they've got in him, what kind of leader he is, and how they're going to draw the guys together. And the other leaders on the team are going to really have to step up and take some ownership. And so I totally agree that it's going to be a huge test of what they're made of. I've said this a lot this week. I think a lot of people have just kind of written Alabama off, that like it's over for them. I don't feel that way at all. I don't think it's over at all. I think it'll be interesting to see the way the committee ranks us tonight. But one thing you should note is that the committee cannot penalize you for having a player hurt in the same week. So in other words, they can only look at the body of work, right? They can't necessarily penalize Alabama as being a quote-unquote worst team with Mac until they actually see him play, right? Because you have the Cardell Jones situation with Ohio State, right? So think about that, the fact that with Cardell Jones, they were in some ways better. Ohio State was. Now, I'm not necessarily suggesting that we're going to be better with Mac. I'm just saying that I don't maybe expect to see a lot of movement tonight. But I do think that Alabama is still very much in the race for making the playoff, particularly with a convincing win over Auburn. And so there's still a lot to play for.
All right, Barrett, let's sort of connect the dots. Let's say LSU is able to beat Arkansas and Texas A&M, and Georgia continues doing what they're doing. They made Atlanta. What does that game need to be for Alabama to jump in that conversation when you look at the SEC championship game between LSU and Georgia?
Well, it's a great question. And first of all, LSU needs to win the game. There's no doubt. It wouldn't hurt if they won it convincingly. I think if Georgia wins the game, that's the simplest scenario for the committee today. It's just because I think Georgia and LSU would both get in with an LSU loss, where you have, presumably, again, there's a lot that can happen, but you say Ohio State and you say Clemson, we'd be there with LSU and Georgia. I think if Georgia loses and has two losses, then they're not in. And so then I think it would come down to, Alabama and presumably the winner of the Oregon-Utah game, possibly Oklahoma, all in that conversation. And I think best case scenario, honestly, is that Oregon beats Utah, and then Alabama kills Auburn or beats them convincingly, and then you're sitting there looking at Oregon and Alabama, and then Oklahoma maybe is out of it too if you're talking best case scenario. And they're obviously common opponent's a huge factor. So they're going to look and they're going to see that Alabama just killed Auburn, that's the only loss that Oregon has. So I think that's best case scenario. If you want me to paint it up for you, that's how I would draw it up. You've
watched a lot of college football, and it's I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but do you think Alabama could be in this Final Four? Do you think they could? Because it's just so hard to project what this team's going to look like. Injuries. I've never seen a team have as many injuries at key positions than this team, and it feels like I've said this before, but it's true this year. If they get in, do you think they could do some damage? Do you think they could get a few weeks to heal up and maybe look like a little different football team?
Well, that's a great question, and it's honestly something I've pondered over a lot. Look, I said before in the weeks prior that I thought the playoffs had an opportunity to have the 4 best teams as far as the most balanced in the history of the playoffs. If you're talking about Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and LSU, if those were the 4 teams then, I'm not sure who would win between those 4 teams. I think that it would be so well balanced that all 4 of those would really have a legitimate chance to win. And, I still feel that way about 3 teams. I really feel like Clemson, Ohio State, and LSU are all really good teams that could all win the national championship. I'm not quite ready to put a 4th team in that category yet. Maybe Alabama, is the 4th. I really honestly don't know. And I think we just need to kind of see more evidence. I'm certainly not as confident because, again, there's not that dominant defense this year. So I do think all 3 of those teams will be favored against Alabama, which I think is, that in itself is a rare, it hadn't happened in a long time where you're talking about there are several other teams in the country that would be favored against Alabama. So, yeah, I'm not saying that they couldn't compete. I'm just saying I think it would be challenging because I do think in a lot of ways those 3 teams that I named are probably a little bit more complete right now than Alabama.
We're talking to Barrett Jones, 2-time All-American at the University of Alabama. Barrett, if I go to total defense and I look at the metric just using yards per game, Ohio State's got the best defense. Clemson, Utah, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia is number 6, and 7 UAB. We'll stop there. Can you have a great dynamic defense? I mean, the ones that you were accustomed to playing with and also have an elite offensive side of the football?
Well, I think you can. I mean, tough question, Ryan, because the way you phrase it, the ones we're accustomed to playing with. I mean, can you have a defense that gives up 8 points a game, like whatever it was in 2011, which, by the way, is the best defense I ever saw? I'm not sure you can ever do that because the number of plays that are run, that was an era where you're talking about, 50, 55 plays a game, like for some of those really good defenses, right? And plus it was a ball control offense. So, I'm not sure maybe if that's your standard, that's probably not going to happen. But, yeah, I do think it's possible to have a great defense. Now, I think in general, just off, the way offenses run now, the way the rules are, it's harder to play defense in general. I mean, I definitely believe that. But I think the way that they've kind of manufactured the rules a little bit and tweaked them, I think they want there to be more offense. Fans like scoring, right? I don't think that's by accident. I mean, the RPO game has really changed a lot of things. So, but I guess with the way you're asking it, is it possible to have a elite offense and also be categorically, comparatively in the same, in the top 10? Absolutely, that's possible. I think it's definitely possible. And, is it tough? Yes, but it's definitely possible in my eyes.
Yeah, and maybe it's just, when I look at those top teams, I think about, okay, if you're going to look at that metric and just look at total defense, then what's the common thing? Ohio State, quality competition. Clemson, quality competition. Utah, Wisconsin. I mean, they haven't played, and it's Michigan. In the top 5, you see teams that offensively in that league that maybe haven't taken off, and they don't have to go up against these explosive offenses that we see down in this part of the country.
Well, and think about how much the SEC has changed, where that's your statement, too, because that is true, that to say that this is the part of the country where the explosive offenses are. The SEC's embraced the spread. They've embraced RPOs. They've embraced kind of the new wave of offense with both arms. And you're right. I think some of the best offenses in the country now reside in the SEC, and I think that's something to be proud and excited for. And it definitely makes it more challenging. Look, I mean, I would say as great as those defenses at Alabama were, that was a time where, at least scoring output-wise, it was extremely different with the way the SEC looked in general. Now it was a different way to play offense, and, there's a lot of arguments you can make about where the offense is not as good. I mean, it was a different era. But I think even looking back then, you could say that maybe the best offenses in the country and that were in different areas of the country. And again, that's a whole segment talking about how, that a lot of people think that's the offense you kind of needed to play back then for that to have success. So, there's a lot to be said in that comment, but I do think it's possible is the bottom line. And, I don't think that we should just come to expect that Alabama can no longer have an elite defense because their offense is good now. I certainly don't think that's the case.
When you look at simplifying everything for Mac Jones, do you think the offense will look much different? Obviously it will, but I mean, what do you do different if you're Sark? And maybe it's a benefit that he's got a lot of first-team reps as the injury happened to Tua a couple of weeks ago, and he's been able to get a lot of reps even last week, taking a lot of reps to the first team. What do you think that offense will look like under Mac Jones going into this game?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it will definitely be more run first. I think that we'll see Najee continue, which, by the way, Najee's been playing just great football. It's been a joy to watch him kind of catch his stride a little bit. He's played really well. So I think it'll be more run first, and not necessarily that it will be run first in percentage-wise, but that it will be, you'll see a more balanced approach. I think it'll be more play-action-oriented with some kind of straight traditional play action. Probably a little fewer RPOs. Not that we won't run RPOs, but just no one could run RPOs quite like Tua. That guy, he was incredible the way he was able to see the field, and his release was so quick. So, I think we'll see some differences in that standpoint. I think there'll be more plays where we're trying to get the ball into our athletes' hands quicker. Where you're just saying, hey, let's get Jerry Judy the football out in space, or Henry Ruggs, those kind of guys. So that, whether that's screens or what it looks like, jet sweeps. We're going to find ways to just get the ball in their hands. So that's some of a few things I predict. But overall, I don't think you'll see a major difference. I think it'll, in just the way that the formations and everything. But you'll just see, in my opinion, probably just slightly different play calling maybe than previously.
Hey, let me get your thoughts. You were there in Waco. You watched a great comeback. It was a great first half by Baylor. It was a great second half by Oklahoma.
Yeah, it was an incredible game. I know I talked to a lot of people that turned it off at halftime because it was 31-10, but it was absolutely it was great. And obviously, I always still am happy to see Jalen Hurts succeed in that situation. That was fun. I do think Oklahoma is they're a flawed team, like many teams. As far as their defense is a major liability. They played much better in the second half. But, man, there's still some guys that were running wide open, especially in that first half when they just couldn't stop the bleeding. But, I do respect the way they came back. Baylor, to me, I kind of do, after calling them previously and watching them on film, that I didn't really feel like they were a true, national champion contender. Now, look, Matt Rule's done a fantastic job. And, it's absolutely incredible when you think about the fact that this was a team that was 1-11 2 years ago. And then they go 7-6, and now here they are at 9-1. It's outstanding, the job he's done. So I'm not discounting that at all. I'm just saying from a national title perspective, I don't think they're quite ready to take that step yet. And I think we saw that ultimately with not being able to score a single point in the second half against the subpar defense. It was a collapse like we haven't seen many of in college football. So it was a great game and a lot of fun. And Jalen did a fantastic job of kind of leading the guys back. They had 5 straight drives of 10 or more plays. So I think they just really wore that Baylor defense down. And finally, towards the end of the game, they were just kind of scoring at will.
Barrett, one of the things that I was talking about yesterday, and I hope we could tie it together. I don't ever want to push you in a certain direction. I always ask you to share a scripture, but we're sitting there and we don't know anything about Tua, and we're all. First thing you hear, you see Cecil Hurt reporting that he's being airlifted back to Birmingham, and we start going through the different negatives, right? You're starting to go, okay, man, is this worse than what we anticipated? And you know how rumors go out there on Twitter, and you begin to read it, you begin to try to find out what's exactly going on, and you're just sitting there almost in limbo because you're like, okay, Nick Saban has spoke, he doesn't really know anything, he's told us what he knows, and then you see Tua tweet out, and during a valley of life, sometimes our response is not always the same. But he said, thank you for all the prayers and well wishes. God always has a plan. And, I think it's those moments like that helps and encourage people that when they're in that valley of life to understand that as Christians, God always has a plan. We may not know what that plan is. And I'm sure Tua Tagovailoa didn't wake up Saturday morning going, man, this is going to be a devastation day. But he had faith enough to tweet that at 9:11 at night. And I just found a lot of inspiration in very simple words that God has a plan. A lot of encouragement for a young man that's ahead of the curve on his faith.
There's no doubt. He's a great kid and just fun to talk to, and just talking to people who know him well. It's really genuine in who he is and the way he treats people. I think that you can tell a lot about someone by the way they treat others. And everyone has always talked about just how he treats all the support staff and the people around him. He's a unique kid. He really is. And a unique football player, but also a unique kid. And, yeah, it's a great point, Ryan, you make, just about the way that God can use things. And sometimes it's just so hard to know and understand why God let things happen certain ways. And, I think back to something that happened to me. I mean, this is smaller than what happened to Tua, but when I got cut from the NFL my last time, and I felt like I was playing good football and couldn't really understand why I was not getting the calls to be, on a team. And again, not saying that's the same thing, but just that was a trial I had. And now I look back at my life and I think to myself, man, you know what? I love my life now so much. I met my wife. We're expecting our first child now, and we live in a great place. I love what I do. I wouldn't trade it for anything, and so it is sometimes hard to know and see and understand kind of what the plan is. But I do believe that, as Romans 8:28 said, that God works all things together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And I don't just say those words, I believe them. And so even though we can't understand why things happen sometimes, we just have to trust the Lord and trust that he knows the plan. And that's much easier to say than it is to do sometimes, because as much as we like to say that in the good times and the bad times, it's hard to do that practically. So, I think that's a great word. And obviously, Tua is using this as an opportunity to really, again, just kind of reveal his character and who he is. And I don't think any of us are surprised who are familiar with him, just that his character is really strong. And adversity has a way of doing that, of kind of really revealing who you are underneath everything. And I think that he's got great character. And again, I just think he's just such an easy guy to root for. I know I'm an Alabama guy, I get that. But there's just so many people, I think, that are even not Alabama people that he just attracted by the way he played the game and by the way he loved people and just his personality. And so just a really special guy. And again, if there's ever a more fun player at Alabama, I'll be really surprised, because he's just so fun to watch, and just the way he played, it was fantastic. It wasn't just on the field either. It was just the combination of him being a great kid and the way he played. It made for something special.
Hey, Barrett, who do you have this weekend?
I have Penn State, Ohio State.
Oh my heavens! Wow, what a game! What a game!
Yep.
Or at least we're expecting it to be a game. We're expecting it to be a game, but
I don't think it'll. I have a feeling it might not be quite the game we think. So we'll see.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and I looked at
I think Ohio State's pretty good, Ryan. I really do. I think they're a good team.
Yeah, they're probably the national champ winner. I think it's pretty easy prediction now.
Really? You think so?
Well, I just think defense still wins championships, right?
You think they're significantly better than Clemson and LSU?
I don't see LSU just – look at what Ole Miss did. You give up that type of rushing yards.
Yeah.
And I think
I hear you.
That's just – I don't want to see it go to the Big Ten, but –
well, Joey Burrow, he's a good football player. We'll see.
Well, I just know the last 30 days is going to be great, or last 60 days of football is going to be awesome. Barrett, thank you, man, as always, for being a part of the show.
I agree. And by the way, don't sleep on Clemson. I feel like everyone's forgotten about it. They're sitting there lurking, and Dabo's just shoveling in this rat poison in his players' minds. So it's I know that I know they're going to be a contender. Anyway, thanks for having me on, Ryan. Appreciate it.